So yesterday I went and saw the new Beauty and the Beast movie. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not really sure why Disney is doing this whole, oh, let's take our old animated classics and reboot them for live action thing. I mean, on one hand, it seems like a good idea to sort of translate the tale into modern times and everything, but if all you're going to do is just remake your old movies, then there isn't really much of a point. And I have to say that definitely extends to Beauty and the Beast, although I will say, despite that little bit of nitpicking right off the bat, I actually did enjoy it. It was pretty much exactly what you would expect from a live-action do-over of Beauty and the Beast. From what I read, apparently this wasn't going to be a remake of the musical, but rather a new version of the story altogether without the music. But director Bill Condon then protested, saying, "Everybody loves Be My Guest, how could they not want to see that?" So therefore it became the musical, although in live action. Now, I'd like to say that my expectations for this movie were pretty reasonable. I mean, I went into this one expecting to give it a 7 out of 10. That's pretty much exactly what I got. I didn't have my expectations too high because I knew if I did, I would probably walk out calling it the biggest piece of shit of the year. I didn't have them too low because then I would probably get a little too easily swayed. I say this because I am a huge fan of the 1990s original movie. Like, I watched it so many times, like pretty much every other child of the 90s, and we had to get a second tape because I wore out the first one from watching it so much. So, pretty much, yeah, there was nothing to get disappointed by for me, honestly. I mean, there are quite a few gripes that I have with the film, but I can't say that they impacted the movie too much or impacted my expectations. Now, something that's definitely a given when you're making a movie like Beauty and the Beast is that obviously it's going to look gorgeous. And for the most part here it really does. Some parts look as though they may as well be a painting. Other parts look like they used the animated movie as a storyboard. And I must say, it works really well for this film. When you have someone like Bill Condon on board, you definitely know that the cinematography and the direction is going to be very well done. Like, he knows exactly when to use what type of shot. He knows exactly when there needs to be a tracking shot, or a close-up, or a simple zoom in or zoom out. Never once does he basically shove like 5 shots in 5 seconds to make it look like basically a music video. That is something that is way too lacking in movie musicals nowadays, where they basically may as well just be a music video because it's so ultra quick and stylish and everything that your eyes get tired from like even just watching a second of it. Now, I say for the most part because, well, not everything really adds up. The CG is mainly well done, but there are quite a few parts where it does kind of slip. One shot in particular shows Belle looking down, and then the camera basically zooms away from her face to show how far down it is, and the castle surrounding her looks almost as bad as something from one of the Hobbit movies. There were a few other issues I had with the CG, like some of the backgrounds don't exactly look convincing, like some of the compositing work was not very well done, but I mean, these were far and in between, and they really only lasted a few minutes, so it's not like they bothered me too much. Now, the singing was also really well done. Everyone had competent enough voices, especially Emma Watson, who had some beautiful moments where she basically just was allowed to sing right out. And I must say, Gaston was definitely my favorite singer in the film. Luke Evans has a grand voice and really lets it shine. Although I will say, he's also the one person in the film where I didn't hear obvious auto-tune on his voice. And that brings me to another area of the film, auto-tune. It was distractingly obvious from the word go right at the beginning of the song Belle.
There goes the baker with his tray like always. The same old bread and rolls to sell. Every morning just the same, since the morning that we came to this poor provincial town.
Good morning, Belle.
When Emma Watson opened her mouth and sang the first few lines, I could immediately hear the auto-tune. And I got the sense that she's a lovely singer, but why do we need to hear auto-tune on her voice? The worst part is, like, the few moments where she is allowed to, like, really let her voice shine in the film are also painfully obvious, and then when you hear a line right after that that's auto-tuned to shit, it really kills the effect. The Beast pretty much had the same effect on his voice near the end of the film as well during his big song, and it really sucked out all the emotional impact. That isn't to say that the singing is shit, obviously, because everyone in the film has their moments to shine, like Ewan McGregor during Be Our Guest. He did a fantastic job during that song, and I think Josh Gad really suit the sassiness of the character Le Feu as well, especially on the song Gaston. To be honest, I had really only two big issues with the film as a whole, and they're both limited to technical aspects. The first is the color grading. Now, the color grading was good, but it was wildly inconsistent. There were parts that kind of looked too bright and parts that kind of looked too dark. Probably the most brought up example for comparison between the animated film and the live action version is the ballroom scene. And that scene looked really dull and lifeless until the part where the camera tilted down and showed up the stars in the sky. Now, I know obviously people are going to comment on this review saying, well, duh, he's all dark and everything and it's supposed to suit the darkness of the character. Well, okay, that's fine and all, but it doesn't really explain why the scene has the color scheme of Hiroshima when it doesn't need to. I mean, there are plenty of dark movies that look very colorful. There are several shots in the Dark Knight movies that are dark and are colorful at the same time. I know, this is not the same movie, and that's exactly the problem. This is a Disney movie, not a Batman movie. Another part is the audio editing. I honestly wish that whoever did the audio editing on this film did a much better job and paid a lot more attention to what was going on, because literally everybody in this film sounded exactly the same, regardless of where they were or how far off in the distance they were or how close to the camera they were. Every person sounded like they were literally talking right to the microphone. And I know that sounds a little nitpicky, but the animated version has a much lower budget and animation to work with, and had a much better sense of distance in certain scenes. And there are lower budget fantasy and sci-fi movies which are basically doing the same thing. So yeah, that does become a bit of a problem, and it does show you where their priorities are, or are not. Now, it's kind of pointless to mention the story because you've pretty much already seen the animated version and you probably already know how it's going to end. There are a few changes, but they're honestly very minor and not so drastic. Like, I have read quite a few hyperbolic complaints already about how this change basically defeats the purpose of the whole story. But I mean, there's several different fucking versions of Beauty and the Beast and have been since at least the 1500s. I mean, in all honesty, there's not much to change or to destroy the point of at this instant in time. As far as the performances go, everybody does a pretty decent job. I will say, I wasn't expecting to buy Emma Watson as Belle, judging by the clips in the trailers. They didn't really do much to convince me. But I will say, she did kind of suffer the pressure put upon her by several different versions of Belle in the past, and I think she did a good job. In all honesty, like, she wasn't fantastic by any means, but she suited the character, and I mean, in all honesty, I could imagine worse choices for the characters, so she did a good job, and I'll definitely give her a free pass for that one. Easily the best thing about the film was Luke Evans as Gaston, and of course, Josh Gad as Le Feu. These guys had easily the best chemistry on screen the whole film. They were easily the highlights. Whenever they showed up, the film just suddenly experienced a huge surge in energy. Dan Stevens, however, really surprised the hell out of me with his performance. I wasn't really expecting him to do good as the Beast, and as a matter of fact, he was absolutely fantastic. Like, he nailed the Beast's anger and his darkness and the pain he's suffering from the curse put upon him from all those years ago, and I must say, he was really a good choice for the film. He and Emma Watson together were really some of the best moments of the film entirely, because you totally bought that they really loved each other. Well, at least that is, when they actually got around to loving each other, or at least when she got around to loving him, or I don't know, this story is way too fucking complicated. But in all honesty, they were very believable as a couple, and they were very believable, in the end, you wanted to see them together. Another real highlight was Cogsworth and Lumiere, played of course by Ian McKellen and Ewan McGregor. Now get this, I had no idea who Lumiere was, and I was very surprised to find out that he was played by Ewan McGregor. That's how very well he does in this film. Even at the very end when he transformed back into his human counterpart, with all the makeup and stuff on him, I still couldn't tell that it was Ewan McGregor. So that, at least in some part, should be a good testament as to how good a character actor he is and how suited for the role he was as well. I'm not really sure that Beauty and the Beast in live action was definitely necessary, and mind you, I will say the same thing about the previous 2 Disney live action films, but one thing I will say I was impressed at was the fact that the movie did advertise itself as a remake of the live action film. Now, when I saw Jungle Book at this time last year, I was pretty disappointed because the film was hyping itself up to be the next big thing as far as Disney goes, and then I went and saw it and it was basically just a remake of the musical animated film. I was obviously expecting something a lot more. But this time though, they actually truthfully advertised themselves, so I can't say I was too disappointed. Again, I'm not really sure that this was necessary, but I will say it's definitely worth watching, and I'm not sure that I will see it in the theater again, but I definitely will give it another viewing once it's out on Blu-ray. I'm giving Beauty and the Beast a 7 out of 10.